Alrighty, good day everyone. It's Josh here, and we're continuing our review on eschatology here. We've got some awesome people here. We've got John and David in the house. So good day, guys.
How you going? So we've done an introduction, which is available on our YouTube, but just been chatting with Dave, and Dave has a bit of a background with eschatology and how it's affected his life and how his opinions have changed over the years, and I'm the same. My opinions have changed as I've studied. So Dave, would you fill us in a bit about your background and what that view that you held, how did it impact your life?
Yeah, sure. Okay, John. Well, my spiritual background was of the historicist persuasion. What does that mean? Historicism is when the events of biblical prophecy are attempted to be fit into history, real events of history. In fact, there was a roadmap of history right through from the time of Christ through to Jesus' second coming, and all of the events from A to B were described in Revelation and indeed Daniel. So that was actually the prevailing viewpoint for many years since the Reformation in Christian circles, but maybe in the last 100 years or so things have changed, and it's now perhaps not, it's fallen by the wayside to a large degree. What did that mean for me? Well, what it meant for me is that I was always looking for a bad guy over my shoulder. This particular brand of interpretation would try and blacklist certain branches of Christendom, in this case Catholics, and so I was scared of Catholics. I was scared of the Pope. It really just had me running scared for most of my life as I was growing up. And I guess I would see now that isn't a really helpful thing for many different reasons. I don't think that's what the book of Revelation is trying to persuade us to do. It's not trying to make us scared. It's trying to reassure us, trying to give us hope and reassurance, confidence. So yeah, I guess that's how it was for me. What about you, John?
Well, as a young Christian, I was fairly naive, and I went along with whatever the pastor said. And our particular minister had a very dominant view that it was a futuristic view of the book of Revelation.
What's futurism? Just in a nutshell.
So it's looking at the book of Revelation to see the end of the world. So how everything's going to unfold. So we're looking for an antichrist, a one world government. These are not necessarily things that I read in the book of Revelation, but were told to me. So the book is a very difficult book to interpret. So for young Christians who try to read it, it is a bit of a challenge. So they basically accept what is being told to them. And I was told that there was the Pope was the Antichrist, and Henry Kissinger was also an Antichrist.
Who's Henry Kissinger?
Henry Kissinger.
No, I'm honest. I don't know who it is.
He was
the Secretary of State.
Secretary of State in the United States. So, and the reason that they believed that he was the Antichrist is because he won a Nobel Prize for Peace in bringing some sort of stability in the Middle East.
That's terrible, John.
That's a terrible thing to do.
What a jerk!
And in the futurist view of Revelation, that this person would be described as a person of peace, but would turn.
So like a Luke,
yes,
or an Anakin Skywalker kind of situation.
Yeah. Then there's also a view that the Pope may not, if he wasn't the Antichrist, he could be a false prophet. And this false prophet in the book of Revelation apparently has to have a mortal wound and then recover. and the Pope was shot and recovered. Now we have the Pope-mobile, and they
Oh,
protect the
that
Pope.
was John Paul.
Yes.
I remember that.
Yes.
Yes.
So
Far out.
that sort of lined up with a futurist view of a false prophet. So
Right.
It's interesting that you say that though, because when I think of someone with a mortal wound who recovers, I immediately think of Jesus, not the Pope.
good point. John.
Am I on the right track here?
That's a good point. But yeah, I probably lived in a fair bit of fear as well, because our church in those days used to show these movies. I don't know if you've ever seen these movies, but Josh, if you like horror movies, I recommend them. There's The Distant Thunder, one called The Mark of the Beast. I think it was 3 movies. I can't remember the third. But they're basically horror movies, and if you refused the mark, and the mark was something that went on your wrist and on your head, if you refused it, they would cut your head off. And being a young Christian and very passionate about following Christ, I put my hand up to be a person who would be martyred.
It sounds a bit like
Is this a
Islamic
youth group?
State.
Yeah.
What kind of an event is this?
So, so there was a theory that there was going to be 144,000 super saints that would roam the earth after the rapture. So when the rapture happened, 144,000 would roam the earth as incredible saints. So I put my hand up to be one of those, but I'd probably be definitely be armless, maybe headless.
So you wouldn't really be putting your hand up at all, then, would you? No.
So yeah, there was a lot of fear
Yep.
in my life around those viewpoints, and I was converted because of these viewpoints. Because in those days, I was convinced that the world was coming to an end, and my job in those days was reclaiming a walking track from St. Bernard's Hotel down to Wire Rope Falls, which is
In Mount Tambourine.
down in the valley. And when I was down there reclaiming this walking track, I came across all sorts of interesting people who were building little humpies, little house shelters, to escape a tsunami that was going to hit the Gold Coast, because God was angry about the prostitution on the Gold Coast, so therefore he was going to send a tsunami and wipe out the Gold Coast. So there was people down there that had those sort of views, and so I had some interesting conversations around that, which dovetailed into the church's belief about the judgment of God and a tribulation that was going to come on the earth. So it all seemed quite true to me. But I don't want to put down the futurist view, because there's some great benefits if you hold that view. And one of them is that you evangelize, especially when there's catastrophes like this happening in the earth, like wars or rumours of wars, or
It gives a sense of urgency, doesn't it? That
that's right. Yeah,
you've got to get out there and
got to evangelise, because people
tell
will go
people.
to hell.
Right.
So they evangelise well, especially at the moment. A lot of people are out evangelising because they believe that this COVID-19 is a sign of the end, and so the people are out talking to their neighbours, evangelising them, hoping they'll come to Christ, which is a good thing.
Yes.
Positive.
Yes. And I've seen it many times where, even though perhaps I don't fully agree with the methodology, but God still uses that.
Yes.
And I've seen that many times over, and I guess you're a prime example of what you were converted in this state of panic, if you like, but you matured in, well, I hesitate to use the word matured, but you've changed in your viewpoint.
Yes, the reason I changed was a lot of it didn't sort of add up to me, and when I asked questions, I didn't get really great answers. So I went to Koorong bookstore and bought myself a commentary and started reading this commentary, and I found that I couldn't find many commentators that actually held that futuristic view. So it started brings some sort of doubt in my mind that it may be a view that is not held by everybody,
No.
and definitely not held by everybody, especially theologians.
It's interesting because you look through the Christian bookshelves and certainly in the popular Christian literature, it's almost ubiquitous, isn't it? It's just everywhere. But if you perhaps walk over to the commentaries and the more I don't know,
Studious works.
right?
Yeah.
It's not there very much at all. In fact, it's really just mainly come from one particular theological college in the US. Is that right?
Dallas Theological College.
Yeah.
So there was a gentleman by the name of Hal Lindsey who made this view very popular. But it was actually the Brethren movement that started this view in 1830. Their view of a futurist view of Revelation. But it wasn't that big or well believed, only by the Brethrens, and also I think the Mormons also believed that view. However, in the 60s, there was a revival in California and also in Chicago, and it was called the Jesus Revival. And a lot of these young Christians wanted to go to Bible college and study. And a lot of the colleges didn't like these long-haired hippie folk and didn't accept them. But Dallas Theological College did. And especially Hal Lindsey, who came out of that college, it was a draw card for a lot of these young ministers. So they went in there to this college and were taught this view.
And I guess these guys would have been really passionate
young
new
men
converts,
and,
yeah.
and women.
Yeah.
And they ended up pastoring churches, and so they started promoting that view. And those churches became the more progressive style of churches, and that revival in California grew and grew.
Just clarifying, what view was that again, John?
It's a futurist
The
view.
futuristic view, yeah.
So it's looking at the book of Revelation like dare I say, like a crystal ball, looking at how the events will unfold in the future. But when we are looking at any book of the Bible, we first need to ask who wrote it, and to whom did he write it, and for what purpose. And to draw a conclusion that John was writing this letter to people 2,300 years from when he got it, just doesn't add up. And it must have meant something to those 7 churches in Turkey, in Asia Minor.
Yes, I mean, if we're looking at reading the book of Romans or the book of Galatians, the first question we ask is, what was the message that Paul was trying to convey to the Romans or the Galatians?
Yes.
And we can't really hope to understand what Paul is trying to say for us if we don't understand what he's saying for the people who it was originally written to. And it just seems to not make any sense if we approach the book of Revelation in a completely different way.
Yes. So my views started to change. Then I went to college in America, and the dean of the college just happened to be one of the major authors of a large theological book called The 4 Views of Revelation. So he actually taught all major views of interpretation and left it up to us actually to make up our mind which view we would hold dear.
Wise man.
Yeah. So he said he didn't want to influence us in any particular direction, because he himself went through change and realised the view that he held was incorrect, and maybe there are other ways of looking at it. And I've just listened to his studies again, and he's also changed his mind again.
Right. And I guess that's a lesson for us sitting here today, is that, well, we've changed our mind. We've changed in the way we approach these studies now. Maybe we will continue to change. So probably we shouldn't be too dogmatic even now.
No, we can't be too dogmatic. And a lot of my theology that I've held has changed over the years, and I hope it continues to change. And hopefully it's more Christ-centered than what I've held in the past.
Yeah.
And I think that's the overall vision of Jesus in the book of Revelation, that it's a progressive vision. So the first vision we see is in Jesus standing in the midst of his church, and with eyes a flame of fire, and feet brass, and hair as white as snow. There's a vision of Jesus in his church. The visions continue to progress and to grow. And we never could read the book of Revelation and go, now I know what it's all about, because it is the revelation of Jesus, and the revelation of Jesus, or the unfolding of who Jesus is continual.
You know, we can fully expect that God will reveal to us further truths as we need them in our lives.
Yes.
Yeah.
But first of all, we need to know what it meant to that early church.
Yes.
What it was read to them, and they would have come to some sort of conclusion of what it was. And the position I hold now is that church was under persecution, and there was a lot of madness happening in the world, like Nero and others that were causing lots of persecution. And this letter, or these visions, were to comfort the church.
Yes. So if you're not feeling comforted by them, maybe you might be missing something.
So there's a blessing in this book. It reads and understands the words of this prophecy shall be blessed. So if you're reading the book of Revelation and it's causing you anxiety, then you may be reading it incorrectly.
Anxiety wasn't a blessing last time I checked.
No.
So we've been chatting for about 16 and a half minutes. Why don't you give us some juicy stuff to finish off? Where have all the cards, I guess, so to speak, landed for you? If you wanted to say, David and John, each where, what revelation in a sentence or a paraphrase means to you?
Can we go first?
To me, it's a wonderful picture of Jesus Christ. When I read the book of Revelation, I'm not looking at it to discover the end of the world. I'm reading it to discover who Jesus Christ is now in his glory. The word revelation is the word apocalypse, which means to unveil. So it's to pull back the curtain and to see Jesus as he really is. Not just the Jesus of Galilee, but the Jesus that sits in the heavens.
Christ glorified.
Christ glorified.
Yeah.
So it's an amazing book if we read it that way. So I'm not looking for the future, although I do believe that as we get towards the seventh vision, there is a glimpse of the future, new heavens and new earth. But mostly it's about Jesus in the midst of trouble and persecution, and that he's with us. Even though the persecution is happening, even though the disasters are happening, Jesus is there with us. And that's a comfort.
Yeah, I guess for me, I'm fairly convinced that probably we're never going to completely agree on all of the details of what the visions, how the vision should be applied to us now and in the future. But I think we should be able to agree that Jesus is there. Jesus is there in the book of Revelation. He's revealed in a way that's far more spectacular, far more, there's a greater depth than perhaps anywhere else in Scripture. And the harder you look, the more time you spend looking there, the deeper you'll see the message of the gospel and the comfort, the power of Christ. It's all there. So yeah, that's I guess that's for me in a nutshell.
Yes, and I think the futurist view, where it fell down for me was when I looked at these pictures in Revelation. The only comfort was that there was going to be some sort of rapture, and that I was going to be taken away from this 7-year tribulation, and all this would happen on the earth without me being there. But the more I read it, the more I discovered that Jesus is saying, no, I'm here with you in the middle of this persecution, in the middle of this strife. I'm joined to you, and be comforted knowing that I'm here.
I mean, you could hardly have a greater promise of comfort than for the God of the universe to be right there with you.
Yes, yes.
and he's already suffered for us, and he's promised to suffer with us.
Yes. And the early church was going through massive amounts of persecution, and that's what they needed to hear. They needed
Yeah.
to hear that God hadn't abandoned them, that He was with them, and He was in the midst of them, and He would lead them to a healthier way of dealing with the problem.
Yep.
I could just outline the 7 visions, if you like.
Oh, yes, please.
I believe, Dave might have a different opinion, but I believe there's 7 visions in the book of Revelation. And the first one starts in Revelation chapter 1, verse 10, and it goes to chapter 3, verse 22. And when you get to the end, you'll see the new vision, because it will say, and then behold, and then I saw, the Lord showed me this. So
It's like a scene change, isn't it? It's like the curtain comes down on one act and raises on another. Yeah.
Fades to black.
and it's usually a phrase like that will jump out at you and go, then I beheld, or then it was revealed to me. So the first vision again is from 1:10 to 3:22. It's Jesus in the midst of his churches. And then you have chapter 4, verse 1 to chapter 8, verse 1. The seals, Jesus he's walked across the sea of glass, and he's taken the scroll from the hand of God, and these seals are, there's horrible things happening on the earth, but there's Jesus. He's there at the right hand of God, and he has everything in control.
And the fact that he's worthy to open these seals is indicative that he has our future in hand.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you have the trumpets from 8:2 to 11:18. Then you get into some interesting visions of beast with harlots and those sorts of things. So Revelation 11:19 to 15:4, and the fifth vision 15:6 to 16:21, and then 17:1 to 20, verse 3, and then from 20, verse 4 to 22, 5, and then it wraps up in the last verses. But they were visions of Jesus in the midst of his world, in the midst of the world, and the catastrophes and problems and concerns that we all have. But we'll get into some of those visions, like the beast and the harlot, and try and work out what they actually meant to the early church. So once we know what they meant to the early church, we can then make some sort of conclusion of what they mean to us.
It's a wise thought there. That's good. Oh, well, should we wrap up then, guys, and say goodbye?
It's probably a logical place to finish off for today, I guess.
Yeah, it seems good.
We'll
Well,
try and do it again maybe next week. Yeah, we'll start into the book, because there's a few people who've been watching this and thinking, when are you going to get into the book? But
It's not something you can just get into without really outlining some background, some history, some ground rules and so on. Yeah.
I was listening to a theologian just recently doing the book of Revelation, just to make myself with it, and it's week 7 and he still hasn't got into the book. He did 4 lectures on who wrote it. Is it John the Apostle, or is it another John?
Wow. Or doesn't matter.
Does it?
It's
Well,
it's
here's
been
the version that does matter,
okay.
and just briefly.
this won't be brief.
How does any book become part of the canon of Scripture? How do they make that conclusion? Because there's lots of writings in the days of Christ and after
Mm.
Christ.
Well, it had to be either written by someone who was with Christ, an apostle, or someone who had eyewitness to one of them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why the conclusion is that John, the apostle, wrote it, because there's no record of another John who was close enough to the apostles.
Yeah, that's
We
compelling.
know that Mark wrote the Gospel of Mark, but he wasn't an apostle. But he walked with Peter, so it's actually Peter's account of Christ. So therefore, maybe Kenneth and Luke
It was with Paul.
with Paul.
It's very interesting because the first three Gospels all have their own kind of prophetic passages. The Matthew 24 and 25, and Luke and Mark both have that as well, but John doesn't. So you could argue that, well, he doesn't because Christ had something else in mind for him later on in the book of Revelation.
Excellent. Well, farewell, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you hopefully next time. See you later, guys.